My daughter Amelia tossed my keys onto the kitchen island as if she held the deed to the place, then announced that I should have breakfast on the table by 5 a.m. for her new husband, a man who apparently liked things done precisely his way. 24 hours later, I found myself setting an alarm for 4 a.m., but the surprise I was brewing with their morning coffee was intended to be a wake-up call they would never forget. My name is Arthur Vance, and at 72, I believed I had witnessed the full spectrum of my daughter's capacity for disappointment. I was sorely mistaken. It was a Wednesday in early September when Amelia appeared at my lakeside cabin with her new husband, Julian, 3 oversized suitcases, and an air of entitlement that could have soured the entire lake. I was savoring my morning coffee on the porch, watching the mist rise off the water, when the slam of a car door echoed through the pines. Through the screen door, I saw my 30-year-old daughter striding up the stone path, a man I'd never laid eyes on trailing her like a well-tailored ghost. "Dad," she called, pushing her way inside without knocking. "We've arrived." Arrived for what, precisely? I hadn't extended an invitation. Our last conversation, 2 weeks prior, had ended with her hanging up on me after I suggested marrying a man she'd known for only a few months might be a touch impulsive. "Amelia," I said, walking in from the porch with my mug still warm in my hand, "this is unexpected." She was already hauling luggage toward the guest room stairs, her new spouse standing awkwardly near the entrance. "Dad, this is Julian, my husband. Julian, this is my father, Arthur." She delivered the line with an emphasis meant to underscore a major life decision made without my input. Julian stepped forward, offering a handshake, and what I had to concede was a disarming smile. "Mr. Vance, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Amelia talks about this cabin constantly." Did she now? "And what brings you both to my little sanctuary, unannounced?" I asked. "We're celebrating our honeymoon," Amelia declared, as if that explained the intrusion. "We were looking for a place that was quiet and secluded. Besides, hotels are so generic, don't you find?" I glanced around my living room, which was certainly not prepared for impromptu guests. My fly-fishing gear was laid out on the table, a half-finished woodworking project was clamped to a chair, and my latest history book was face down on the sofa where I'd left it. "And how long did you plan on staying?" I asked, bracing myself for the answer. "Only a few days," Julian replied swiftly, glancing at Amelia. "Perhaps a week," she amended. "We haven't decided. That's the joy of spontaneity, isn't it, Dad? You always said life is about embracing the unexpected." I had said that when she was 17 and terrified to audition for the school musical. I hadn't intended it as a blanket permission to treat my home, like a no-cost bed and breakfast, decades later. "Of course," I said, because there was little else to say. "Let me show you to the guest room." As I led them upstairs, I noticed Julian surveying the property with the keen eye of someone who understood real estate values. This cabin had been my refuge for the past decade, ever since my wife passed. It was modest for the area, but the lakefront footage alone was worth a small fortune. That afternoon, while they took a walk along the shore, I prepared their room and tried to pinpoint why this visit felt so different from Amelia's usual dramatic appearances. It might have been the way Julian assessed the house, or perhaps the fact she'd married without a word to me, but something felt distinctly wrong. By evening I had my answer. Julian had stepped outside to take a call, and Amelia poured herself a glass of my best whiskey without asking. "Dad, we need to talk," she began, settling onto my leather sofa. "We're not just here for a romantic escape. We came because we feel it's time for you to start thinking about your living arrangements." "My living arrangements?" I kept my voice steady, though a cold unease was spreading through me. "You're all by yourself out here. What if you had an accident? Julian believes, and I concur, that it would be more sensible for you to relocate to a more manageable place, maybe a nice condo in the city." I stared at my daughter, this woman I had raised, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college tuition I had paid, and whose selfish tendencies seemed to expand with each passing year. "So you just appeared on my doorstep to persuade me to sell my home," I stated flatly. "Not to sell, exactly," she hedged, avoiding my gaze. "Julian has a background in property investment. He feels this land could be leveraged far more effectively if it were under professional management." The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place: the sudden visit, the new husband with an eye for value, the suggestion that I was too old and frail to live safely on my own. "How considerate of Julian to be so concerned with my well-being," I said. "Help me do what, Amelia?" "Make some sound financial choices. You could live quite comfortably off the proceeds from this place, and Julian could oversee all the investment details for you. It would be like having your own private wealth manager." For 30 years I had witnessed my daughter's talent for self-serving logic, but this was a new masterpiece. She had married a stranger and was now proposing I hand over my home to him for professional management. "That's incredibly generous," I said, "but I'm quite content with my current living arrangements." Amelia's smile tightened. "Dad, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't it be better to make these changes while you can still appreciate the benefits?" Julian chose that moment to return from his call, his charming smile firmly in place. "Sorry about that. Business waits for no one." He seemed to sense his wife's gentle persuasion wasn't landing. "Mr. Vance," he said, leaning forward with the kind of earnestness that likely closed many deals, "I hope you don't think we're overstepping. Amelia is just worried about you." And when she described this magnificent property just sitting here underutilized— "Underutilized?" I asked. "Well, for one person, it is a great deal of space." I looked around my living room, at the stone fireplace I'd built with my own hands, the kitchen, where I'd learned to cook for myself and found I enjoyed it. "You're right," I said at last. "It is a great deal of space for one person. That's what makes it perfect." The following morning, Amelia delivered the statement that truly revealed her entitled mindset. "Dad, we should discuss expectations," she said, scrolling on her phone while I stood at the stove like some hired cook. Julian was at my dining table, reviewing financial reports on his laptop, treating my home like his personal satellite office. "What sort of expectations?" I asked. "Well, since we're guests here, we should establish a few routines," she said, finally looking up with an expression I recalled from her teenage years, just before she would announce something I was bound to dislike. "Julian follows a very particular morning schedule," she continued. "He's an early riser, likes to start his day properly, quality food, a quiet atmosphere for his calls with the East Coast." I glanced at Julian, who nodded as if his wife were discussing something entirely reasonable rather than dictating terms to her host. "That sounds like a problem for Julian to manage," I said pleasantly. "Actually, Dad, I was hoping you could help," she said in a wheedling tone that hadn't worked since she was 10. "Since you're up early anyway and you enjoy cooking." "I enjoy cooking for myself, on my own time." Julian looked up from his tablet, flashing a smile that must have cost a fortune. "Mr. Vance, what Amelia is trying to say is that we'd be very grateful for your assistance as our host." Host? As if I'd invited them to disrupt my peaceful life and start making demands about meal service. "I see," I said, turning back to the eggs before I said something I might regret. "It wouldn't have to be complicated. Amelia pressed on, taking my silence for consent. "Just something ready by 5 a.m. His coffee should be black and strong, and he prefers something like poached eggs or a fruit platter. Nothing too demanding." 5 in the morning. She expected me, a 72-year-old man, to rise at 4 to cook poached eggs for her husband of a few weeks, the same man who suggested my home was being underutilized. "Poached eggs," I repeated slowly. "Or whatever you think is best." "You're so good at this sort of thing, Dad," she added dismissively. "It's one of your talents." One of my talents. As if domestic service were a gift I should be eager to share, rather than skills. Developed to care for my home and myself. I served them their breakfast, watching Julian eat with the focus of a man who had never once had to prepare a meal for himself. After they ate, they declared they were heading into town to explore and would return for dinner. As I watched their rental car disappear down the gravel drive, I wasn't thinking about what to cook for them. I was thinking about alarm clocks, coffee beans, and the perfect surprise to prepare for Julian's 5 a.m. breakfast. I spent the afternoon conducting my own research, not the kind Julian would appreciate. I started on my laptop, looking up public records and business filings. Julian Croft, it turned out, was associated with several dissolved LLCs. His primary business had a single project listed, a condo development in the city that was mired in foreclosure. More troubling was a local news article about a lawsuit from several seniors who claimed they were manipulated into selling their homes below market value to an investment firm called Croft Holdings. The most interesting discovery, however, was that Julian had been married before, to a woman who had owned a thriving art gallery. The gallery was abruptly sold 2 years ago, right as their divorce was being finalized. When Amelia and Julian returned, I had a much better understanding of their true intentions, and I had a plan of my own. "You know, I've been considering what you both said," I told them, watching a flicker of triumph pass between them. "That's wonderful, Dad. I knew you'd see the logic." "Yes, the logic is becoming quite clear," I said, smiling at Julian. "And, Julian, I've also been thinking about your breakfast needs. 5 a.m. is quite early." "I know it's an imposition," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise, "but I truly do perform better with a structured start to the day." "Of course you do. I understand completely," I said, looking him in the eye. "I'll ensure everything is prepared for you tomorrow morning. Something special." "You're the best, Dad," Amelia said, kissing my cheek as if we had just closed a business deal rather than discussing my new role as their unpaid private chef. At 4 a.m., my alarm sounded. I moved through the quiet kitchen, muscle memory guiding my actions as I prepared what was sure to be the most memorable meal of Julian's life. The sun was still hours away, but I was wide awake, focused entirely on the task. First, the coffee. Julian liked it black and strong. I ground the beans fresh, as requested. Then I added my own secret ingredient, a generous dose of a powerful, fast-acting laxative, crushed into a fine powder. Just enough to turn his digestive tract into a disaster zone, but not enough to cause any real harm. Just enough to make his day profoundly uncomfortable. As the coffee brewed, I poached his eggs. I had been cooking for 50 years, so a picture-perfect breakfast was no challenge. The only challenge was deciding how much extra seasoning to add to his hollandaise sauce. I had crushed several more laxative tablets and whisked them in. Its rich, lemony flavor would easily mask any slight bitterness. For Amelia, I made simple toast and jam. At just before 5, I heard stirring upstairs. Julian's internal clock was as precise as his demands. I arranged his breakfast on my best china and waited. "Mr. Vance?" Julian appeared in the kitchen, wearing a silk robe and looking surprised to see a full breakfast waiting. "You actually did all this?" "You said 5 a.m.," I replied. "I believe in giving people precisely what they request." I poured his specially brewed coffee into a mug and watched him take his first sip. He ate with gusto, praising the eggs and the coffee, telling me how much he valued someone who understood the importance of routine. "You're quite the host," he said, finishing his plate. "Amelia was right. You have a gift for this." "I have many gifts," I replied. "Some just take longer to become apparent." Roughly 45 minutes later, I heard the first indication that my recipe was working. Julian's voice, laced with urgency, called down from upstairs. "Amelia, where's the bathroom?" Amelia, who was still downstairs, called back directions, not looking up from her phone. A moment later, his voice came again. "I found it, but is there another one?" I continued wiping down the already spotless counters, hiding a smile. Over the next hour, Julian made half a dozen trips to the bathroom. By the third, his pace had quickened. By the fifth, he was practically running. "I don't get it. He's never sick," Amelia said, pacing the floor. "Food poisoning can be quite abrupt," I offered with feigned sympathy. "Maybe it was that restaurant you visited yesterday. But I ate the same thing he did, and I feel fine." "Everyone's system reacts differently." Julian appeared at the doorway, pale and sweating. "Amelia, I need you to call my doctor. Something is terribly wrong." "Should I take you to the hospital?" Amelia was starting to panic, which was almost as satisfying as Julian's discomfort. "Let's see if it works its way through your system," I suggested helpfully. "Sometimes these things just need to run their course." "Mr. Vance," he said weakly, "I hate to be a bother, but do you have any stomach medicine? Anything?" I made a show of rummaging through my medicine cabinet, returning with a bottle of antacids that I knew would be useless. He swallowed 4 and retreated upstairs. For the rest of the morning, the house was filled with the sound of his hurried footsteps between the bedroom and the bathroom, punctuated by Amelia's worried questions. By lunchtime, he was too weak to come downstairs. "Dad, I think we need to take him to the clinic," Amelia said. "He's been sick for hours." "If you think it's for the best," I agreed, "though these stomach bugs can be persistent." "This isn't a bug. This is serious." As they prepared to leave, Julian managed to make his way downstairs, looking as if he'd aged a decade in a few hours. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry about this," he said. "These things happen," I replied. "I do hope you feel better." I watched them drive away, Julian hunched in the passenger seat. Then I returned to my kitchen and disposed of the remaining laxative powder. Tomorrow Julian would likely feel much better, but I suspected he would be less enthusiastic about requesting breakfast at 5 a.m. And this was only the beginning of what I had planned for my uninvited guests. Julian spent 3 hours at the local clinic, where they diagnosed him with a severe case of food poisoning and advised him to rest and hydrate. When they returned that afternoon, he looked like a man who had lost a significant battle. "The doctor thinks it was something he ate yesterday," Amelia reported as she helped a pale and weakened Julian upstairs. "He needs to stick to bland food for a few days." "How awful," I said, following them with a pitcher of water. "I feel terrible." "What if it was something I served him this morning?" "No, Dad. The doctor said the timing was wrong. If it were breakfast, it would have started much sooner." Julian collapsed onto the guest bed. "Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry. I know we've been a disruption." "Don't you worry about a thing," I said, fluffing his pillows. "Your only job is to recover." For the rest of the day, Julian remained in bed while Amelia played the dutiful nurse. I prepared a simple broth for his dinner and served it on a tray, playing the part of the concerned host to perfection. "You're very kind," Julian said weakly. "I don't know what we'd have done in a hotel." "That's what family is for," I said, noting how easily he embraced the term when it suited him. That evening, while Julian slept, Amelia and I sat on the porch. "I'm worried about him," she said. "He's never ill." "Stress can weaken the immune system," I suggested. "Starting a new marriage, traveling, making major life plans. It can all take a toll." "What major plans?" she asked. "Your proposal that I sell this place. That's a significant financial step. I'm sure Julian feels the weight of helping me make the right decision." "Oh," she said, considering it. "Actually, he has some concrete proposals he wants to show you when he's feeling better." "I'm sure he does," I murmured. The next morning, a much improved Julian emerged, though he still moved cautiously. "How are you feeling?" I asked, offering him some herbal tea. "Much better, thank you. I believe the worst has passed." "Excellent. There's nothing worse than being sick away from home." He nodded, then looked around my kitchen with that appraising expression I was beginning to detest. "Mr. Vance," he said, "I hope we can pick up the conversation we started." "Of course," I replied. "In fact, your bout of illness yesterday made me realize just how vulnerable I am out here alone. If something serious were to happen to me, who would know?" Amelia appeared in the doorway. "See, Dad? That's exactly what we've been saying." "Yes, you have been very convincing," I said. "Julian, you mentioned you had experience helping others with their property decisions?" "Absolutely," he said, his energy returning. "It's a specialty of mine, helping seniors transition from large homes they can no longer manage." "Seniors?" I was 72, but he spoke as if I were already in a nursing home. "And you manage all the financial aspects?" "Everything. The property valuation, sale negotiations, investment of the proceeds. My clients don't have to worry about a thing." "Your clients?" I echoed. "How many seniors have you assisted in this way?" Julian glanced at Amelia. "Several. I just completed a very successful transition for a gentleman in the city who was struggling with the upkeep of his family home." "The gentleman whose son told me the house was now in foreclosure." "That sounds ideal," I said. "I'm very interested in hearing more about the process." For the next hour, Julian laid out his vision for my future. I would sell the cabin to his investment firm for a fair price, determined by his own appraiser. The funds would be invested in a portfolio he would manage, providing me with a monthly income. I would move into a small condo in a retirement community. It was a perfect plan for Julian. "This all sounds very professional," I said when he was finished. "I'm impressed." "I believe in thorough preparation," he said. "And frankly, Mr. Vance, you're at the perfect age to make this move before you're forced to by circumstances." "Forced by a health crisis or financial trouble that would leave me vulnerable to exactly the kind of predator he was." "I appreciate your concern," I said. "It's touching." He beamed, clearly believing he had successfully reeled in another lonely old man. But he had no clue that while he was indisposed yesterday, I had been making my own calls to the son of George Patterson in the city, to his ex-wife's brother, Michael Walsh, and to a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. Julian thought he was closing a deal. In reality, he was walking straight into a trap. "Julian," I said, rising from the table, "I believe I'm ready to proceed with your proposal." The look of victory on his face was almost comical. "That's wonderful news, Mr. Vance," he said, reaching for his phone. "I can have my team begin the assessment tomorrow." "Actually," I interjected, holding up a hand, "I'd like a few others to be involved. A decision this important requires proper oversight. My lawyer, for one, and my financial advisor, Henry Manning." I saw his smile tighten. The presence of actual professionals would certainly complicate his smooth sales pitch. "Of course," he said. "I always encourage clients to seek independent counsel." "I knew you would understand. Oh, and I also took the liberty of inviting Michael Walsh to join our discussion." The color drained from Julian's face. "Michael Walsh?" "Yes," I said pleasantly. "The brother of your late ex-wife. He had some fascinating stories about your business dealings, particularly concerning the sale of his sister's art gallery. He said you convinced her to use it as collateral for some investments that didn't quite pan out." Amelia looked from me to Julian, confused. "Julian, what is he talking about?" "It's complicated, darling. Michael and I had some business disagreements. He's still bitter." "Is he bitter about the bankruptcy, too?" I asked. "Or just about his sister losing her life's work to cover your failed ventures?" Julian stood abruptly. "I think there has been a serious misunderstanding here." "I don't think so," I said, my voice hard. "I think things are finally becoming clear. You want me to sell my home to your company, let you manage the money, and move me into a place where I'm completely dependent on you." "That's not how I'd describe it." "How would you describe it? The same way you assisted George Patterson in the city." This time Julian took a step back. "How do you know about him?" "Oh, his son and I had a long chat. He's very curious about why his father's monthly payments stopped and why his family home is now in foreclosure." Amelia was staring at her husband with dawning horror. "Julian, what is happening?" "Amelia, your father is listening to lies from disgruntled people." "Disgruntled people?" I repeated. "Is that what you call the elderly homeowners you convinced to sign over their properties for pennies on the dollar? Is that a legitimate business practice?" "Those are complex financial arrangements," he stammered. "Sometimes con artists get caught," I interrupted, "and sometimes their new wives discover they've married a fraud." The charming facade was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating look I'd suspected was there all along. "You have no proof," he snarled. "Actually, I have a great deal of proof. My financial advisor is also a forensic accountant. He took great interest in the public records for Croft Holdings." I walked to the counter and picked up a folder. "Would you care to see the complaint I filed yesterday with the State Attorney General's office? It details a pattern of elder fraud. I included Mr. Patterson's story, Michael Walsh's testimony, and a rather compelling analysis of your investment schemes." Amelia sank into a chair. "Dad, are you saying Julian is a criminal?" "I'm saying he's a predator who targets people he perceives as vulnerable. The truly clever part of your scheme, Julian, was using my own daughter to get to me." "Amelia, we're leaving," he said, grabbing her arm. But she was staring at him, the pieces connecting in her mind. "The quick wedding. You wanted to be married before you met my father." "Don't listen to him," he hissed. "He's just a paranoid old man." "I'm 72, Julian. Not paranoid and certainly not helpless," I said, holding up the folder. "And I'm not someone who is intimidated by a failed developer with a history of defrauding the elderly." Julian made a move for the door. "The state police will be very interested in your whereabouts," I called after him, "especially now that you're under investigation." He turned back, his face a mask of rage. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Actually, Julian, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is, do you know who you tried to con?" As he stormed upstairs to grab his things, Amelia sat at my kitchen table staring at the documents. "Dad," she whispered, "did I really bring a criminal into your home?" You brought someone who saw you as a key to a lock, I said gently. The criminal part was just his profession. Julian was gone in less than 20 minutes, speeding away in their rental car as if the cabin were on fire. He left behind a stunned Amelia at my kitchen table, staring at the evidence of her husband's crimes and his phone, which he'd abandoned in his haste. "Dad," she said finally, her voice small, "how long did you know? I suspected something was wrong the moment you arrived talking about my living situation, but I didn't have proof until yesterday." I sat across from her. "The real question is, Amelia, how much did you know?" "Nothing," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I swear I thought he was legitimate. He showed me documents, testimonials. I thought he loved me. He loved the idea of this property," I corrected her gently. Julian's abandoned phone buzzed on the table. The caller ID read George Patterson. "Amelia, I have to take this." "Mr. Croft?" an elderly man's voice asked, frail and worried. "I've been trying to reach you. The bank called again about the foreclosure." "Mr. Patterson, this is Arthur Vance, Julian's father-in-law. I'm afraid he's not available." The story that poured out was heartbreaking. The man had trusted Julian with his home and his future, and now he was facing homelessness. I gave him the contact information for the State Attorney General's Elder Fraud Unit and a legal aid society, then hung up, my heart heavy. I looked at my daughter. "That is what your husband does, Amelia." She was quiet for a long time. "What do I do now?" she asked. "You make a choice," I said. "You can try to help him, or you can cooperate with the authorities and start to undo the damage." That afternoon, Detective Samuel Chen from the State Police Financial Crimes Unit arrived at my cabin. "Mr. Vance," he said, "the complaint you filed has opened up a much larger investigation. Julian Croft seems to be part of a network that has been running this scheme across several states for at least 5 years. We've identified more than a dozen victims." "Detective," Amelia spoke for the first time, "what happens to me? I married him, but I didn't know." Detective Chen looked at her. "That will depend on your willingness to cooperate." "I'll cooperate," she said without hesitation. "I'll tell you everything." For the next 3 hours, we gave our statements. As the detective prepared to leave, he said, "Mr. Vance, you may have saved several other people from becoming victims. Most people don't think to investigate a family member's new spouse. Most people don't have family members who show up demanding poached eggs at 5 in the morning," I replied. A few days later, the FBI took over the case. Agent Martinez and Agent Kim arrived, their demeanor all business. "Mr. Vance," Agent Martinez said, "we have frozen Croft's accounts, but he has gone to ground. We believe he will try to retrieve something he left here." "He left a phone and some clothes," I said. "Are you sure?" Agent Martinez showed me a photo on his tablet of the guest room. Tucked behind a plant was a small metallic object. "We believe that's a portable hard drive containing records of his entire operation." "And you want to let him come back for it," I said, understanding immediately. "You want me to use my cabin as bait?" "We want to give him the opportunity to incriminate himself further," Agent Kim clarified. Amelia stepped forward. "My father has done enough. You can't ask him to put himself in danger." "Whether we set a trap or not, he may return anyway," Agent Martinez said grimly. "He's a desperate man." "But if we set a trap," I said slowly, "you'll be here waiting for him." "Exactly." I thought of George Patterson's terrified voice. "What do I need to do?" That night, with federal agents hidden around my property and my cabin wired for sound, I dialed Julian's number, playing the part of a scared old man who wanted to make a deal. "Julian," The police keep calling. I'm frightened. I just want this to end." "I want that too, Arthur," he said, his voice smooth. "I need to come back to the house for some personal items. If I can get them and leave, this whole misunderstanding can be resolved." "When?" "Tonight. Late. Make sure the doors are unlocked." As I hung up, Agent Martinez gave me a thumbs up. "He's on his way." Julian arrived just before 3 a.m. I watched from an upstairs window as he moved through the darkness with a predator's confidence. He let himself in with the spare key Amelia had given him. "Arthur," he called from the living room, "are you awake?" I came downstairs, feigning fear. He stood in the kitchen, but the charming mask was gone. As he stepped closer, I saw the glint of a pistol tucked into the back of his jeans. "Arthur, thank you for being reasonable," he said. "You know, I was thinking about our phone call, about how scared you sounded." He took another step, and I realized something. "You're not scared at all, are you, Arthur? You've been playing me from the moment I got here." "FBI!" Agent Martinez shouted from the doorway. Julian spun, drawing his weapon in a fluid motion. "Don't move!" Agent Kim yelled from the top of the stairs. "Arthur, you're going to walk out to my car with me," Julian snarled, grabbing my arm. His plan became terrifyingly clear. He hadn't come for a hard drive. He'd come to eliminate the primary witness. "If something unfortunate were to happen to you," he sneered, "their whole case against me would fall apart." I realized then that while he was focused on the agents, he'd forgotten about me. "You're forgetting one thing, Julian," I said, pressing the small panic button Agent Kim had given me. It didn't sound an alarm. Instead, it triggered a device my friend Henry, a retired electrical engineer, had helped me install. An EMP generator in the cellar killed all power and electronics in the cabin, including the firing mechanism of Julian's modern pistol. In the sudden, total darkness, I heard the agents move in. Julian's panicked clicks from his useless firearm were the only other sound. When the emergency lights flickered on, he was on the floor in handcuffs. As they led him away, he looked back at me. "This isn't over." "Yes, Julian," I said, "it really is." But as I watched the car disappear, I knew this was just the beginning. 6 months later, I found myself in a quiet cafe in Aspen, Colorado, pretending to read the paper while observing a woman named Helen being charmed by a man planning to steal her inheritance. His name was Marcus, Derek's former partner. "Arthur, do you have a visual?" Agent Kim's voice crackled in my earpiece. "I see him," I murmured. "He's showing her the documents now." I waited for my cue, then approached their table, playing the part of a slightly confused old man. "Excuse me," I said to Helen. "You look so much like a friend of mine who went through a terrible ordeal. A man convinced her to sign over her late husband's business." Marcus tried to dismiss me, but I persisted. "I'm sure you're nothing at all like Julian Croft," I said with a frail smile. The man, whose name was Marcus, froze. A moment later, Agent Chen appeared behind him. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest." That evening I called Amelia. "We got another one," I said. "That makes 7 major arrests," she replied, "and 14 women who still have their homes." "How many more are out there?" I asked. "Too many," she said, "but fewer every month." Julian had tried to create a victim, but had instead forged a team. My daughter, my fellow survivors, and I were now part of a network dedicated to dismantling his. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. "Dad, almost there. Agent Kim called. They have a new case in Arizona and want both of us. Ready for another trip?" I smiled. Julian had tried to steal my home. Instead, he had given me a new purpose, one larger than any piece of property. I typed back a single word. Always.